What's going on, South by East fam? Welcome back to the intersection where we talk about the culture, the scriptures, and everything in between. John, we have a video by, recently there was a plane crash that happened, and the president took to a press conference to speak about what happened, but something intriguing happened during the questioning portion of that interview, and today that's what we're going to take a quick look at.
Crash was somehow caused and under a diversity and inclusion hiring initiative spelled out on the agency's website. Can you imagine?
Are you saying this crash was somehow caused and the result of diversity hiring? And what evidence have you seen to support these claims?
It just could have been. We have a high standard. We've had a much higher standard than anybody else. And there are things where you have to go by brain power, you have to go by psychological quality, and psychological quality is a very important element of it. These are various very powerful tests that we put to use, and they were terminated by Biden, and Biden went by a standard that's the exact opposite. So we don't know, but we do know that you had two planes at the same level. You had a helicopter and a plane. That shouldn't have happened.
Mr. President, you have today blamed the diversity elements, but then told us that you weren't sure that the controllers made any mistake. You then said perhaps the helicopter pilots were the ones who made the mistake.
It's all under investigation.
I understand that. That's why I'm trying to figure out how you can come to the conclusion right now that diversity had something to do with this crash.
Because I have common sense. Okay.
Because I have common sense.
So, we're fresh off the big game, and there's some things that play in that. The first African-American quarterback to win a Super Bowl, do you know who it was, bro?
Mm-mm.
Doug Williams played for the Washington Redskins. And it was such a monumental thing because for years, although you have a league that's dominated by African-Americans, they never let African-Americans play quarterback because they had this stigma that they felt like African-Americans were not smart enough and didn't have the intellectual capabilities of playing quarterback. Some of the things he said in there mirrored some of those kind of thoughts. And it's hard when you hear old tropes coming back like that. The we later found out, that we found out who the pilots were. And then to just say, like, man, we don't know who's at fault, but we're going to lay it right here.
But this is who's at fault.
And right. Man, what's so harmful and hurtful about some of that rhetoric is that you could almost begin to feel like for the next 4 years, we're going to be blamed for everything that happens. Hey, it's likely. We're still investigating, but we feel like, hey, this is a likely place to lay this. Without any proof, like the day, I like the hours after, not even a full day after, and doing an interview that way. And so that was hard.
Yeah, I mean, I think in our country, we struggle to ask the right questions often. Part of what troubles me with this conference is at the end he calls their conclusion common sense. Common sense is something that everyone would accept as true. And even the person who usually when you talk about having common sense, it's because someone or something hasn't demonstrated common sense in that space. And when you invoke common sense, you're saying even the person who did the unwise action would recognize that this should be the direction that we should go. What the president stated were, by his admission, his opinions. not only his opinions, they were unfounded opinions. Not only were they unfounded opinions, they were unfounded opinions that were contrary to proper evidence. When you go, well, when is the, all right, if DEI practices were the reason that we had this crash, my thought is, well, when's the last time we had a crash like this?
Over
And
15 years before this.
15 years before this. During, if I remember correctly, it was during the Obama presidency. Am I correct? I believe it was 2009. So, and he blamed during the larger press conference, which you'd have to go watch the 37-minute press conference. During the larger press conference, he says the hiring policy started by the Obama administration and then carried out by the Biden administration were to blame for these crashes. Now, during the Obama presidency, we only had one crash. During the Biden presidency, we had no crashes. Almost a month after this, we've now had close to 5 crashes.
Or more.
And he said that he has repealed all these policies. There is no evidence to back up what you're saying. It's not common sense. It's opinion. And I don't blame people for having bad opinions. I say this all the time when we're brainstorming. This is a bad idea, but I'm going to throw it out because you can use bad ideas and bad opinions to refine to get the good ones. But when bad ideas and opinions become law, we have a problem.
Or when we leverage, when we don't understand what sometimes being leveraging really, really bad opinions on a big platform can do, like taking out a full-page ad to say that 5 young boys murdered a woman and not understanding, oh, it might eventually get corrected, but you're going to ruin some lives forever because
we're on brand.
We just didn't take the time to really find out the solution. And it was easier because it was common sense, that they did it. And I think we got to look at some things with that. And here's the deal: more than this, more than just this incident and Mr. President in this instance, this should be a cue for all of us to slow down some. Like, to try to connect, like, we can be so quick to try to connect dots that are not there. And sometimes we need to refute some easy answers. Like when information start coming out, this is the other deal. For so many, DEI has become a coded word for race. But when information started coming out about this crash, I believe that the only kind of DEI aspects of those who were in places to make decisions in here, there was a white female, and her family. Like, they knew this, but when the president said DEI, so many went to immediately think there had to be a racial minority instead of a gender minority. And the family was scared for her name to be released because of how people were going to go at her. And I think she was just in the helicopter. I can't remember if she was even flying. I think she was just in the helicopter. And so it's just one of those deals, man, where we're in a time where things have been ratcheted up anyway. And to be responsible, it should mean that we take extra time. Not shorten that amount of time.
Yeah.
And man, we can say stuff in a moment, and I know, like, people want to hear something from the president. They want to hear, like, when things happen locally or whatever else, they want to hear stuff from us, and we can say what we know and speak into that and speak to the grief people may be feeling and display empathy without doing some of the other things.
And those things do harm. And I thought for the first 5 minutes to give him credit of that press conference, because I listened because I wanted to see how our commander-in-chief handled this situation. And for the first 5 minutes, he had a moment of silence. He spoke really well of the families and sent out prayers, and it was great. And then he kept talking. And sometimes we need to know when to shut up. and we need to know what questions to ask. So there's a series of questions that I ask when I get information that is incendiary, information that I need to make a decision about, and it's probably going to be a charged decision, or this could affect people, or I might make a stir, right? First thing I ask is this true? Is this information true? Well, we believe that it was DEI policies. Okay, well, is that true? What can I go verify to see if that's actually the case? Because if it's not true, we can stop right here. It's just not true, right? And then it's like, if I find out it isn't true, why would that person say that? Or why was that information leaked? What's the
purpose?
What's the purpose
What's
of
gain?
this? What's the game? If it is true, then I go, okay, then why did that happen? Yeah. And then the next question is, what are the implications of this? Who all does this impact? Because sometimes you can find out some heavy information and it's true, and the way you handle that information does more harm than the original situation. Because you haven't thought about who all does this impact, and what role am I playing in this by spreading this information or by making the decision that I'm making? Because no, none of us watching here are most likely the president of the United States. I don't think that he watches the South by East podcast. But we all have credibility and influence in spaces where our decisions, even if it's just to spread information, has an impact on people around us.
And here's, I'm about to say something that's gonna get me in so much trouble.
We can bleep it out. Aaron.
So here's why we can't have it both ways. And I've heard this from the opposite side. So when there's a police shooting, and it involves a white officer and an African American male, or African American female, but a lot of times we're seeing it really being publicized as African American male. Yeah. And the African American community comes out and be like, man, this was based on race. And the plea I've heard from a lot of people that sit in a different space have said, this is not the time to be discussing that. We should just be mourning that there was a loss of life. We shouldn't be discussing whether race was involved or not. And I've heard a lot of my African-American friends, different things of that nature, more liberal friends, even of different ethnicities, say, when should we discuss it then? We should discuss it now. And feel some kind of way about that. Yeah. Now we're in a situation where the president comes out less than 24 hours after an event and says, I believe DEI was involved with it. And then I heard some of those same people that were saying, if it was a police shooting, no, we should discuss race involved right away, right now. Yep. And then, but in this case, we should not discuss right away if DEI. So, and here's the deal. Here's how this mirror shows the flaws in all of us.
Come on. Yep.
Is that we like to play it both ways, and we simply cannot play this thing both ways, and all of us need to slow down. We need to slow down. And we need to see how each other is made in the image of God. Yeah. And we need to see how every single individual has infinite dignity, value, and worth, whether they live like us or believe like us or even like us or not. And we're out here making snap judgments that have real consequences and may ignite further things to happen that actually injure image bearers. Yep. And man, so it's like that. We're trying to play it both ways, and both sides do it.
Yep, we do.
And both sides do it, and so we're both guilty of it, but we only want to call it out when we see it the other way. Yep. And I know, man, I know that's going some people going to be mad at me for bringing that out, but we are playing it both ways, and we got to stop it.
And it's true, man. And it's like, you and I spoke a little bit about this and some other things the other day, and I said, part of the worst thing that's happening is that we're losing the diversity of voices. When we all have biases, we all have gaps. And when there is only one perspective that is making all the decisions, that's why we live in a democracy, so that doesn't happen. When we only have one perspective making all of the decisions,
it's not good for anyone.
No, it's not. And we hurt ourselves with our gaps. I can't tell you how many times we used to be a part of a larger majority church. And I sat down with some friends at that church, and we worked through some really tough social situations. Some things happened during that period. And as I sat down with some of them, there were some times where I learned some things, and there were some times where they gained some perspective from me where they were like, man, some decisions I was making were wrong, and I need to switch, and that different perspective, because different perspectives are just perspectives. A perspective is not wrong. A perspective is a perspective.
The thing that becomes injuring is when we take our perspective and make it gospel.
And make it gospel, right? Our perspective should not be the end of our conclusion. Our conclusion should come from a diversity of perspectives. That's why you have a body that Christ gives authority to, and no one individual.
Man, we're gonna have to get on this on another episode. And we can't take all stats or whatever else and create causation from that. I saw a post last night. I know I should get out of the toxic swim tank. But I saw a post last night of somebody taking an African-American person's words that's associated with this other group that's known to just throw some stuff that's absolutely bonkers out there and say that welfare is what ruined the African-American community. And they gave these stats are showing the increasing percentage of single moms in the African-American community. Mm-hmm. But they only gave stats on the African-American community.
Right.
They didn't show stats on the white community over that time, the rise in single moms.
Right.
And how the white community actually uses up more welfare dollars than the African-American community. And I'm like, hey, there's some other things at play in this, and there's some other stats that showing you singling this out and doing a causation around this is not. We need to slow down, and we need to ask some deeper and better questions around some of this stuff.
And I want to point something out, because often when things like that happen, you'll hear people say, that's racist. And a lot of times people are like, I don't understand how that's racist. These are stats, these are numbers, these are facts. It's because when you start asking questions, where you drill down to gives a different conclusion. When you give stats like that, and you talk about only how welfare has affected the African-American community, the question is, why? What are the implications? Has it affected other communities? Why has it affected the African-American community this way? And without any other information, the only answer you get is something must be wrong with black folks.
Yeah.
The only answer you can get is racist. But when you start pulling in other information and going like, for one, is this true? For two, if it is, then why? Okay, if these are the factors that caused this to happen, did they happen across the board with other communities? Oh, we're missing some other stats.
Yeah.
Man, we have to ask the right questions. We have to have a diversity of opinion. We've got to slow down in order to be able to do that. And we have to challenge our biases. All of us, we have to challenge our biases, because understand, when anxiety goes up,
performance goes down, motivation goes down, behavior goes down.
And so we're in a place of high anxiety, all of us.
Yeah, and I've told you time and time again, I feel like that's why we keep seeing all these plane crashes and accidents, is because the anxiety is so high, and then the focus is there, and things keep changing and creating chaos for our government workers and different things of that nature. And so we got to look at ourselves in this. We got to look at how we're doing some things, and man, if we're gonna make it through these next couple of years, we need to slow down. We need to think through what we're saying, and we can't be out here reacting to everything that happens.
Yeah.
So,
but how about you? What do you think, and what perspectives might you be missing? What are some spaces that you're going to use to fill that perspective?
yeah.
We'd love to hear about it. Comment, like, subscribe, follow us on your favorite podcast space if you haven't done that yet, and we'll see you next week in the intersection.